Third part. Greylancer was summoned to the operations room at the counterinsurgency's headquarters as soon as Marcella awakened. I've read the records. The fair-skinned beauty stared at Greylancer with a look that was neither disapproving nor cordial. The counterinsurgency base camp was equipped with a surveillance system in case of enemy attack. I cannot maintain discipline when my sub-commander acts alone and without notice. You are entirely right. Greylancer nodded, contrite. At minimum, the law must be observed. This much was in his blood. So, Marcella asked, frigid. I paid a visit to Merling's castle and impaled him as he slept inside his coffin. Oh. Her crimson lips rounded into an O, but her eyes, shaped like arrowheads, were bereft of emotion. That much I believe. What surprises me is your safe return after killing the castle's lord. Then you do not know Merling. He left orders to treat an invited guest as a guest to the last, regardless of his own fate. His orders are inviolable. Then it appears this battle is over. Wishful thinking, I'm afraid, he said, hiding none of the contempt for the woman's shallowness. If there is even one vessel of metal in that castle, he will defend the castle to the last man, even after his lord has perished, and for certain if Merling ordered his men to resist to the last. According to your characterization of him, Merling doesn't seem the kind of noble to give such an order. If there is a vessel of any metal. On the other hand, they might agree to a bloodless surrender if so ordered by Merling. Therein lies the gamble. We've been appealing for the castle's surrender, but we've yet to hear a response. Let us discuss a course of action at the War Council meeting, but say nothing of our meeting here. Greylancer grinned again, this time in admiration. A shrewd move. In the event the enemy refused to surrender, and it became known that Merling was dead, the morale of the counterinsurgency forces would increase tenfold. Meanwhile, the enemy's morale would typically decrease. However, in Merling's case, the veneration his vassals held for their lord was far more powerful than even a noble's true death. Should the two armies come to blows, the counterinsurgency would face a surprisingly intractable enemy, killing its will to fight. As commander, Marcella could ill afford to engage in a long and necessary battle. Page break indicated by a small cross. As a result of the War Council meeting, the generals, fuming from the morning's attack, had reached a consensus. They would commence the siege as soon as the barrier was neutralized. But our neutralizer will not work against Merling's barrier. When one man voiced this reality, another said, we have no choice but to wait until the Science Corps makes the necessary enhancements to the neutralizer, and so we must bide our time. There is no other way. Agreed. A malaise filled the war room. On the battlefield, the warriors gathered here would burn in pursuit of the enemy. But once war-making was understood as a futile exercise, the blood pulsing through their bodies turned cold, their vitality quelled. For better or worse, this was the noble's nature. Perhaps it was also the cause of the nobility's eventual decline. They were ignorant of Greylancer's breach of enemy lines and murder of Merling. Commander Marcella had kept the facts from even the top generals. Greylancer, who'd closed his eyes and relegated himself to bystander, suddenly, angrily, popped his eyes open. So insufferable was the air of indecision that he had reached the end of his rope. Would he press to ride his chariot once more and lead the attack on the enemy? Or would he defy Markella's intentions and tell them that Merling had perished? Like fish, noticing boiling magma spouting out of murky waters, the warriors turned in Greylancer's direction. At least, they attempted to until a fist came crashing down atop the table. Lord Greylancer, the young Duke of Crowlock from the southern frontier sector, turned his flaming eyes from his trembling fist up to the great warrior. His given name was Darshan. Never mind the others. But how can you sink into this morass of cowardice? This is intolerable. I won't stand for it. One barrier and you're fit to sit idly by, staring off into enemy territory instead of marching upon it. And you call yourself a warrior. Commander Markella, if you intend to attack the castle, I beseech you, give the order now. And if I do, what do you propose to do? Markella asked. Despite her frigid tone, she looked upon the young noble with kindness. As impregnable as the barrier may be, it cannot stretch 10 kilometers under the surface. Perhaps the commander is aware of the House of Crowlock's renown for our subterranean attacks. Yes, I've seen it with my own eyes from your father, at the underground mall, codenamed Landros. Indeed, we have a weapon by that name. The temperature of the magma immediately under the Earth's crust in this part of the world is approximately 1,000 degrees. My men will move through the magma at will, advance below Merling's castle, and break through from below. I beseech you to grant my men that honor. Denied, answered Markella. At this rate, Greylancer felt his temples twitch. She continued, The decisions made by the War Council are ironclad. No one shall disobey. Besides which, the enemy will not give in to brute force. So long as I am Supreme Commander, no one shall die in vain. The young general's entire body trembled with anger. His youth struggled to forgive the vagaries of battle. The commander's orders. The men's eyes shot back to Greylancer as the giant stood from his chair. With the gazes of the generals gathered on him, he strode toward Darshan Crowlock and rested a hand on his shoulder. We are forbidden to defy them even in death, but in the very least, there is one true warrior in our midst. Commander, I yearn to depart from my nightly patrol. This concludes the War Council. Markella's icy voice settled in the spines of the generals, page break indicated by a small cross. Beneath the moonlight, the silver-blue exteriors of the steel moles seemed to shiver in want of returning underground. The hulking vehicles, measuring 100 meters long, were capable of twisting themselves through the ground like enormous insects, albeit ones with conical drills instead of mandibles and caterpillar belts instead of 6 legs. Soldiers were standing at attention next to the 10 moles. They were about to deploy a forbidden assault from a barrier-protected area of the camp that would allow them to elude detection. The eyes of the soldiers shone crimson, and their white fangs gleamed in the shadows cast by their helmets. Standing before the men already briefed of their mission, and awaiting their command, Darshan Crowlock himself, outfitted in battle gear, quietly pointed at the steel insects. Board your vehicles. The men ran without a sound. As Crowlock moved to follow, a rusty voice called it from behind. Do you go? Lord Greylancer. The eyes of the young leader were filled with reverence. You knew? No. Greylancer shook his head. It was only that I would do the same. I beg of you to overlook what you've seen here. It appears the sodden air of the War Council has done something to my eyes. Greylancer affected a bleary-eyed look. We possess the technology to manufacture drill-shaped tanks with liquid metals, Yet we cannot escape the old, he said, referring to the crude build of the subterranean vehicle. By all appearances, it was beyond outdated, rather like an ancient toy weapon out of a magazine from eons ago. The body was even held together with steel rivets. Perhaps the height of the nobility's fondness for anachronism. I shall not stop you, but would you not reconsider? I'm surprised you would ask. The battle is decided in life and death. I can no longer stand idly by on the battlefield in uncertainty. Crowlock rolled up his sleeves and said, "Just you see, Lord Greylancer. If we cannot breach the castle from underground and capture Merling, we shall destroy the castle, even if we must undermine its foundations and sink it into the mental layer." The young noble smiled an invincible smile. Greylancer looked on silently as the steel moles burrowed, one after the next, into the earth. The roar of the machines was stifled by the earth itself as they pushed under the surface. "A dreadful thing," he muttered to himself. Overhearing this, a white-haired officer who was happened nearby asked, "How do you mean?" Greylancer's answer was immediate. "That such a young noble must perish before the likes of you." Chapter 8, End.